All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and do a practice lab practical for the blood vessels. This is for my AMP2, and this is our second lab practical. But again, the review is just going to cover all of the blood vessels. All right, identify the red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So remember, with the vessels, you need to include whether it's an artery or a vein. This is talking about a red vessel in systemic circulation, so that's going to be an artery. We also need to say if it's left or right, if there is a left and right. So this is the left side of the skull. So right off the bat, I know left. And again, I know that it's an artery. Coming up the neck, remember we have the common carotid artery down here, and the common carotid artery right about this level splits into the external carotid out here, and then the internal carotid is going to go deeper up inside the skull. So the external carotid has three main branches out here that we're going to have to identify on the lab practical. This is asking for the one that's at the tip of the yellow arrow. So this vessel right here that's coming up over the temporal bone is the superficial temporal artery. So this answer would be left superficial temporal artery. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So again, red vessel, systemic circulation, so we're talking about an artery. The only red vessels that are veins are the ones that are going to the lungs, right? Or coming from the lungs. Remember pulmonary circulation, so the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, and pulmonary veins, the colors are flip-flopped, and arteries are blue, veins are red, but that's the only case. Everywhere else in the body, if it's red, it's an artery. If it's blue, it's a vein. Right? And then the purple ones are portal veins. Okay, so the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So I'm talking about this red vessel right here. Right off the bat, remember, get a kind of grip on your organs. These two down here, those are paired. Those are the kidneys. Then we have this large brown one here, that's the liver. And then the organ that we're talking about in this case is the spleen. So we're talking about the red vessel going to the spleen. That's the splenic artery, right? No left or right, it's just the one. So splenic artery. All right, this is a very busy model. This view is not great. Can't really see all of the vessels very well, but you guys should be very comfortable with the arteries and the veins on this model, just purely based off of kind of the general area that it's at. So identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So this is the one we're talking about, the red vessel that's right here. First off, it's in the arm, so every vessel in the arm is going to be left or right, depending on if it's a left arm or right arm. This model I know is the left arm. I can tell based off of the head of the humerus and the way that it connects. But everything on this one is left. And again, I'm talking about the red vessel, so that's going to be an artery. Now, remember when we talked about the arteries, we have the axillary artery up in the underarm, then the brachial artery, and then remember that splits, and you've got one going down the pinky side, one going down the thumb side. This is talking about the one that's going down the pinky side, right? And remember, the pinky side is where the ulna is. So this is the left ulnar artery. What if it was talking about the one over here on the thumb side? What would that be? That would be the left radial artery. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. All right, so this is showing us, this picture is not from one of our models. This picture is actually from like 3D imaging software. But again, you should be able to look at this and pretty easily tell me which vessel it is. based on its location. This one is going up the neck, right, which we have, well, up the neck, and then right here you can see where it curves to go into the brain. And remember, there's two pairs of vessels that are bringing blood into the brain, the internal carotid artery and the vertebral artery. This one we know is the vertebral artery because of the way it's snaking between these foramen in the vertebrae. Remember, all 7 of the cervical vertebrae have these transverse foramen, right, the extra holes on the sides, and those are there to protect this vertebral artery. So the vessel that actually goes through these holes in the vertebrae is the vertebral artery. There's one on each side, right? So this is the left side, left vertebral artery. Over here, this is showing us the common carotid, external carotid, and internal carotid, but I would not ask you from this view because it's kind of difficult to see. I know the split is happening right here, but it's kind of difficult to see where each one's going. So I wouldn't ask you the carotids from this picture. Identify the red vessel. We're doing a lot of arteries. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. It's a red vessel, so again, it's going to be an artery. The green arrow is pointing right here. That is on the left side, right? Remember, anything in the arms or legs is going to have a left and a right. So it's not my left or right, it's this guy's left and right. So if I put myself in his position, this is his left side, this is his right side. So everything in this left leg would be considered left. And the green arrow is pointing to the little arches that are at the bottom of his foot. So those are the plantar arches, or deep, technically it would be more appropriate to say left deep plantar arches. Arch is left plantar arch. You don't have to put artery in there, but you can put artery in, that's fine. There are also arches on the top of the foot. What are those called? Those are dorsal arches. So on the dorsal or top side of the foot are dorsal arches, on the bottom of the foot are plantar arches. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So we're looking at a heart model here. Right? This is the back of the heart model. Because we're looking at it from the back, this is left and this is right. So up here's the left atrium. This over here, this is the right atrium. So at the tip of the yellow arrow, we're looking at this blue vessel that's coming into the top of the right atrium. And remember, that is the superior vena cava, the superior vena cava. What about this one that goes into the bottom of the right atrium? That would be the inferior vena cava. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So this vessel is really difficult to see in a picture because it's really small and it's kind of between the other vessels. But what we're looking at right now is the vessels that are going to the brain. So we're actually looking in the skull. The top of the skull has been removed, so the brain would sit on top of all of this. You're looking at blood flow that's right underneath the brain. And the yellow arrow is pointing to, let me change colors, is pointing to a tiny little vessel that goes like this, that interconnects the posterior cerebral artery and the internal carotid artery. And there's one over on this side too. So there's little tiny connecting vessels like this. Those are the posterior communicating arteries. Now I'm specifically pointing to this one, right? And that is on the left side. It's kind of difficult to know left from right from this view when you don't have the skull in front of you, but I know that, this is the front of the skull here, this is the back of the skull here, so that is the left side. So left posterior communicating artery. Remember, most of what we're looking at in here are communicating arteries and cerebral arteries. The cerebral arteries are the ones that are actually bringing blood out to the brain. Communicating arteries are just little ones that interconnect the others. Okay, we've seen this picture before. Now we're going to identify a different vessel though. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. Remember, we said we were looking at the left side of the skull, and the red vessels are arteries. The one that's at the tip of the red arrow is the one that's going to the face. So that's the left facial artery. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. Again, we've seen this picture before. Remember, we said that because this is the left leg, every vessel in that on that side, in that leg, is going to be left. We're talking about a red vessel, so it's an artery. Now, which artery is it? Let's see, at the tip of the yellow arrow, we're talking about this artery that goes right behind the knee. So remember, that's the left popliteal artery. When we were talking about the flow of the arteries, remember, once we go into the leg, it's the femoral artery, which wraps around the back of the femur. And then at the back of the knee, that's the popliteal artery. And then right here, right when you get to the bottom of like the knee joint, that splits into the posterior tibial artery. And then the one that comes around the front is the anterior tibial artery. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So finally, we're getting some veins in here. This yellow arrow is pointing to this large vein right here. This is the vein that goes into the bottom of the right atrium, right? Because the heart is right here and coming out of the bottom of the right atrium and then going all the way, it goes through the diaphragm and all the way down through the abdomen. That's the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava, very big, right next to the abdominal aorta. The red vessel that's going right next to it, that's also really large like that, would be the abdominal aorta. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. We just mentioned this previously. So this is talking about this artery up here. Remember, we said that was the femoral artery. Again, it's in the left leg, so left femoral artery, right? So as soon as the vessel crosses into the leg, that becomes the femoral artery. And then you guys tell me, when that femoral artery gets to the back of the knee, what does it become here at the back of the knee? Hopefully you said the popliteal artery. Identify the purple vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So this model is different. If you're in my class, you've seen this. If you are one of the viewers who is not in my class, this might look a little bit odd to you. This is actually a digestive system model. This is showing us the pancreas right here, right? And then over here, this is the spleen. But what this model also shows us is the hepatic portal veins. So this is a really good demonstration of the hepatic portal veins and the way that they're merging together. Just to get our bearings really quickly, we are looking at the back of this, right? So this is like over on the left side. The spleen is tucked up in the ribs on the left, and then up over here on the right side would be the liver. Right, so like in the body, this is the way that it would be. The liver would be up over here, and then the spleen's over there on the left. Remember, the portal veins are very commonly shown in purple. So match up your P's. Portal veins, purple, right? The way that I like to do the portal veins is just start with the splenic vein, and then remember, we know how they merge. So if we were to, let me change colors. If we were to start here at the spleen, we would have the splenic vein. And then the first one to merge with it is the inferior mesenteric vein. Then the splenic continues. The next one to merge is the superior mesenteric vein. And then where the splenic and the superior mesenteric merge, that gives us the hepatic portal vein. And what do you know? Hepatic means liver. And as I said, this is going right up to where the liver is. So at the tip of the blue arrow, that is the hepatic portal vein, right? No left or right, okay? There's just the one, hepatic portal vein. Remember, the liver has 3 sets of vessels. So there's a hepatic artery, there's the hepatic vein, and then hepatic portal vein, right? So in purple is the portal vein. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. We just talked about this earlier, where the green arrow is pointing to this large red vessel that's here in the abdomen, and that is the abdominal aorta, right? Remember, the aorta has multiple sections. If we were to look up at the heart, remember, there's the ascending aorta that comes up, and then the aortic arch that curves, and then it starts to come down, right? And the thoracic aorta goes behind the heart, up in the chest, but then as soon as the aorta comes through the diaphragm into the abdomen, it becomes the abdominal aorta. We will later also look at a lot of the little branches that come off of it. For example, there's a branch right here, there's a branch here, there's another little branch down here. But this one is actually pointing to the large vessel in the middle. So that answer would be abdominal aorta. Is there a left or right? No, they won't say left or right because there's only one of them. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. Again, this is blood flow in the brain. So we're looking inside the skull right now. Remember, I said that most of the vessels in here are going to be either cerebral arteries, bringing blood to the brain, or communicating arteries, just connecting all the others. This in green is pointing to this artery that's going out to the side like this. There's one on the other side as well, like that. This is a middle cerebral artery. Right, middle cerebral artery, because it's cerebral, it's going to the cerebrum, right, it's going to the brain, and it's in the middle. We have ones in the front, those are anterior. We have them in the back, those are posterior. This guy's in the middle, and this is on the right side. So right, middle, cerebral artery, right, middle cerebral artery. Remember that this, because of the way that we're looking at the skull, right, this is the front, this is the back, because of the way we're looking at it, left and right aren't switched on this one. Identify the purple vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So right off the bat, the fact that I said purple should be telling you something. Remember, purple, P, match up your P's. Purple vessels are portal veins, right? Purple portal. So we're looking at one of our portal veins. Remember, for the portal veins, I always start at the spleen. So this is a little bit different of a model than we looked at before, but we can get our bearings. This is the spleen over here. This big brown organ over here is the liver. So if we start at the spleen, we're going to have the splenic vein coming from the spleen. The first thing that merges with it is the inferior mesenteric vein. Then the splenic continues. The next thing that merges is the superior mesenteric vein. And then where those two merge, that gives us the hepatic portal vein. So this is the purple vessel going into the liver. So this is the hepatic portal vein. Like the same vessel that we just labeled before, it's just on a different model. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So the blue vessel means we're looking at a vein. The blue arrow is pointing right here. So this is the, remember you have to switch yourself around. This is the right leg. So all the vessels on this leg are going to be right. So right vein, we just need to see which one it is. This is pointing to the great saphenous vein. So the answer is right, great saphenous vein. Remember, the great saphenous vein goes all the way down the leg. It starts up here in the groin and it comes down the medial aspect, so at the inside of the leg, all the way down to the foot. So I could point to it where I'm pointing in this picture, or I could point down here, and the answer would still be the right great saphenous vein. There is a femoral vein as well, but the femoral vein, just like the femoral artery, wraps around to the back of the leg. So like the femoral artery comes right here, but then it disappears because it's going around the back of the leg. So you can't see it all the way down. The great, and remember, the back of the knee, it changes anyways to popliteal. But the great saphenous vein goes all the way down the medial side of the leg. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So again, we're looking at the heart model, and the green arrow is pointing to this blue vessel right here. This is pulmonary circulation. So remember, the colors are flip-flopped here. In this case, these blue vessels are pulmonary arteries, and then these red ones down here are pulmonary veins. So this blue vessel that leads out of the right ventricle is the pulmonary trunk, right? The pulmonary trunk, which is an artery, but pulmonary trunk suffices. If I had pointed out here, then you would tell me left pulmonary artery. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. That red arrow is very difficult to see, but it's right here, up top there. So what we're pointing to is this little branch that's coming up and curving like that. And that's one of the branches off of the celiac trunk. So just to review, remember this large vessel in the middle, this large artery is the aorta, and the aorta has multiple branches coming off of it. The very, very first branch is the celiac trunk. That's what this line up here is pointing to. So right at the tip of this line is the celiac trunk. So right in the very, very middle of that, the celiac trunk comes off the aorta, but it's really short. Like right away, it splits and branches into 4 branches, right? So it's got an artery going to the spleen, an artery going to the liver, and then it's got arteries going to the stomach. This one that's going up is the left gastric artery. So the answer here, right, this little like J-shaped vessel that's coming up like that is the left gastric artery. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So we've seen this picture a couple times, and last time we labeled this one here. And remember, we said these vessels that are going out horizontally are middle cerebral arteries, right? Middle cerebral arteries. This yellow arrow is pointing to the vertical part of that vessel, the part that's coming and like protruding through the skull. Remember we said there are two pairs of vessels that bring blood into the brain. The vertebral arteries, those are down here. These are vertebral. And the internal carotid arteries. This yellow arrow is pointing to one of the internal carotid arteries. It's poking through the skull to bring blood into the brain. So it comes up, oops, sorry, I'm coloring in the wrong spot. It comes up through the skull, and then it turns to become the middle cerebral artery. So those vessels come up and then turn, right? They come up through the skull and then they turn. This vertical part that's coming up through the skull is the internal carotid artery. The horizontal part is the middle cerebral artery. So the yellow arrow is pointing to the left internal carotid artery. So that's a vessel that you can see out here in the neck, and you can also see it in the skull. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the black arrow. So we just mentioned this one previously. This is talking about that first branch off of the abdominal aorta. Again, this large vessel in the middle is the abdominal aorta, and it's got a couple key branches coming off of it. Right when you first come through the diaphragm, there's a branch coming off of it called the celiac trunk. The celiac trunk. The next branch is going to be right about there, and that's the superior mesenteric artery, and then the third one is going to be down here as the inferior. But the black arrow is pointing at the celiac trunk. Identify the structure at the tip of the yellow arrow. So this is actually one of the structures that we talked about when we talked about fetal circulation. Remember that when the fetus is in the womb, it's living in water, right? It's completely underwater, so the fetus doesn't breathe air. The fetus gets blood from the mom that's already oxygenated. So there's no need for pulmonary circulation. So we talked about a couple passageways that the fetal heart has to get the blood from the pulmonary circuit to the systemic circuit. Once the baby is born, those things close up and we're left with like little scars, if you will. So this is pointing to an adult's, this is in an adult's heart. This is the little scar that's left over from the hole between the atria. So when that hole between the atria close up, what we're left with is this little imprint called the fossa ovalis. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the purple arrow. So the purple arrow is right here, right, pointing to this blue vessel here. Remember with the veins, there are deep veins right next to the arteries, right? So the brachial vein, radial vein, ulnar vein, those are right up against the bones by the arteries. But we also have another set of veins that are more superficial veins, and that's what this is pointing to, right? All of like this large blue here, this large blue one over here, all of these kind of loose blue ones, those are all big superficial veins. And remember, we have one vein that goes all the way down the arm on the pinky side, and we have one that goes all the way down the arm on the thumb side. So all the way from like the shoulder area down to the hand. This is pointing to the pinky side. The one on the pinky side is the basilic vein, and this is the left arm. So left basilic vein. What if it were on the thumb side? So if I pointed to this one here on the thumb side, what would that be? Cephalic. Right, good, the cephalic vein. We've seen this picture a lot. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. So that's pointing to this one back here. This is one of the cerebral arteries, right? It's in the back of the skull. So posterior cerebral artery, right? And that's on the left side. So left, posterior, cerebral artery. Right? The right is over here. This one would be the right posterior cerebral artery. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the red arrow. So this is one that we did not have pictured in the lab manual, but I mentioned it to you guys and it was listed in your lab manual. It just wasn't pictured in any of the images. What we're looking at again is at the back of the heart. Remember, we already said that this big vessel right here was the superior vena cava, right? And then down here was the inferior vena cava. The red arrow is pointing at this little branch right here that goes into the back of the superior vena cava. Right? So this vessel, it comes up your back and then goes into the back of the superior vena cava. And that is called the Azygos vein. There's no left or right, just the Azygos vein. Identify the purple vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. Remember, purple should tell you right away that this is a portal vein. Okay, a portal vein. And I always recommend that you start at the spleen. Coming from the spleen is the splenic vein. The first vessel that merges is the inferior mesenteric vein. Then the splenic vein continues. The next one that merges is the superior mesenteric vein. So at the tip of the blue arrow is the superior mesenteric vein. You don't have to say portal. The superior mesenteric vein. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So the blue arrow is pointing to this guy right here. This is the blue vessel coming from the liver. So this is just the hepatic vein. Notice I did not say portal, right? Remember, there are 3 types of vessels associated with the liver, right? So 3 types of hepatic vessels. In red, we said was the common hepatic artery. In purple is the hepatic portal vein. And then bringing blood from the liver is the hepatic vein. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So the yellow arrow is pointing to this vessel right here. Note we're in the pelvis, right? Right here's the abdominal wall where we would go from the pelvis to the leg. And that's a major point where the vessels change. When we're talking about the branching down in the pelvis, remember, we'll start with the common iliac arteries. So at the very bottom of the aorta branches and we have common iliac arteries. Then those common iliac arteries branch and we have a vessel that goes deep within the pelvis and then one that goes out towards the leg, right? Deep within the pelvis is the internal iliac artery. This one that goes out towards the leg is the external iliac artery. So the yellow arrow is pointing to the left external iliac artery. What is it right when it passes through the leg, right? So if I pointed right here, what does it become right when it passes through the leg? The femoral artery. So that would be the left femoral artery. The red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. So we're looking at this vessel right here that's coming up through the foramen magnum. Remember we said those are the vertebral arteries. The vertebral arteries. We could identify them in the neck as they come up through the vertebrae, but then also they go up through the foramen magnum. And this is on the right side. So right vertebral artery. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So we're talking about this blue vessel right here. Blue vessel going out to the body is a vein. Remember these paired organs here, those are the kidneys. So we say renal when we're referring to the kidneys. And because there's two of them, that means there is a left and right, right? Most of the abdominal organs, there's not a left and right for. Like the splenic artery, the hepatic artery, but for the kidneys there is. So that's on the right side. So right renal vein. At the tip of the blue arrow, so we're talking about this little guy here, the like little antenna going forward. That's the anterior cerebral artery, and that's on the right side. So right anterior cerebral artery. Remember, we have posterior cerebral back here, middle cerebral here, and then anterior cerebral in the front. The red vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So right here, we're talking about just this little like curve here at the top of the ankle. If we were kind of following the artery down, remember we have femoral artery, then at the back of the knee, popliteal, then that splits. Posterior tibial goes down the back of the leg, and then we have plantar arches. Anterior tibial wraps around to the front of the leg, and then at the ankle, which that's what this is pointing to, at the ankle, that becomes the dorsalis pedis artery, or you could say dorsal artery of the foot. And then at the top of the foot, that becomes the dorsal arches. And remember that it's in the leg, so there's a left and a right. And because this is the left leg, that's the left dorsalis pedis artery, or left dorsal artery of the foot. The blue vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So this is talking about just this little connector right here at the front of the elbow. Remember, like with all of these superficial veins, we said we've got one that goes all the way down the pinky side of the arm. And we've got one that goes all the way down the thumb side of the arm. This yellow arrow is pointing to just this little connection between the two. So at the front of the elbow, there's that little connector called the median cubital vein. Median to the middle. Cubital means elbow, and then it's a vein. And remember, this is the left arm. So left median cubital vein. In the fetal heart, right, so remember we said the fetal heart has blood flow that kind of skips pulmonary circulation because they don't breathe. In the fetal heart, please excuse that typo. There should not be a W there. The hole between the two atria is called the foramen ovale. Right, the foramen ovale. Earlier we looked at what it looks like when it closes up. And remember that was called the fossa ovalis. But when we're in the fetus and there's an actual opening there, it's the foramen ovale. Identify the blue vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So again, we're looking at the heart model. You guys should know the branches off of the large vessels here, even on this heart model, like when you can't really see where the vessels are going, I want you to know the branches. So what I mean by that is these three branches off of the aortic arch, and then these two vessels that are going into the superior vena cava. So remember, this is the superior vena cava, and it's got two vessels that merge into it. Those are brachiocephalic veins. Okay, so we have two brachiocephalic veins. And this is pointing to this one here, which it's kind of hard to tell from this view, but I know that this is the right side of the heart, this is the left side of the heart, so that one's more on the right side. So that is the right brachiocephalic vein. Right, this other one right next to it would be the left brachiocephalic vein. What about the brachiocephalic artery? You guys know where the brachiocephalic artery is on here? Hopefully you said it's this first branch off of the aortic arch. So when you look at this curve, that's the aortic arch right here, and it's got three branches. The first one is the brachiocephalic trunk, which is an artery. And we don't say right or left because there's just one of them. Identify the red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So previously we mentioned that these two vessels coming in through the foramen magnum, that these were the vertebral arteries, right? The left vertebral artery and the right vertebral artery. Those merge with each other, and this one vessel that they become is the basilar artery. The basilar artery. There's no left and right because there's just one. Okay, we're back to this model where we're looking at portal circulation. So identify the purple vessel at the tip of the red arrow. Again, remember this is the spleen, and we always start with the splenic vein and we find how they merge from there. So this purple one coming from the spleen is the splenic vein. That's what we're asking for, so we don't need to go any further. Right? Splenic vein. We don't need to say left or right, it's just the one. Purple vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. Oop, I already did this one. The purple vessel at the tip of the blue arrow is just the hepatic portal vein. Right? Remember this purple one here is the hepatic portal vein. If I asked for the red vessel there, that's the hepatic artery or common hepatic artery. The red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So the red vessel means we're talking about the arteries here. Remember, when we look at the arteries here in the arm, we start up here in the underarm area as the axillary artery. And then once we pass the head of the humerus and we get into the arm, that becomes the brachial artery. You can't see it very well because it's underneath these veins. At the elbow, the brachial splits, and we have the ulnar on the pinky side and the radial on the thumb side. And then remember, in the palm of the hand, those two meet with a little arch, and that's what this is asking for here. So, because it's the left arm, these are left palmar arches. The red vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So this is a little bit far off, but I'm talking about this right here. Remember that the aorta splits and we have the common iliac artery. So that would be the left common iliac. And then once it splits, the one that goes deep within the pelvis is the internal iliac. The one that goes towards the leg is the external iliac. So this one going deep within the pelvis is the left internal iliac artery. The blue vessel at the tip of the black arrow is talking about this right here. This is part of pulmonary circulation. This is going to the lung. We would collect oxygen and then it would come back via these red vessels. So because it's pulmonary circulation, the colors are flip-flopped. So even though this is blue, this is an artery, right? We said it's going to the lung, so it's pulmonary. And that is the right side of the heart, so right pulmonary artery. The red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. Good, so here we can see some more of the branches off of the abdominal aorta. When we look at the abdominal aorta, remember we said the first branch up here was the celiac trunk. Then we have a little nub right here that's hard to see. That's the superior mesenteric artery. And this green one here is pointing to the inferior mesenteric artery. Mesentery refers to the intestines. So the superior one up here comes to like the top parts of the intestines, and then this inferior one comes down to the bottom parts of the intestines. But that little tail that's coming off would be the inferior mesenteric artery. Here we're looking at the left side of the skull. So left, we're looking at this artery that comes back here to the occipital region of the skull. So that's the left occipital artery. The red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. So here we're talking about the artery that's going down the forearm, and this is on the thumb side. Remember, that's where the radius is. So this is the left arm, so it's the left radial artery. What would it be called if it was coming down the pinky side? That would be the left ulnar artery. The red vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So we just mentioned this previously. Remember we said that you guys should know all three branches off of the aortic arch. And we said the first branch is the brachiocephalic trunk. Brachiocephalic trunk. Right, there's no right or left because there's just one of them. The second branch, remember, goes straight up the left side of the neck. Sorry, that's my right. Straight up the left side of the neck as the left common carotid artery. And then this third branch is the left subclavian artery. The red vessel at the tip of the yellow. So this is showing us the artery that comes down the front of the leg. Right, remember we said that the popliteal artery splits, and we've got one vessel that goes down the back of the tibia, one that goes down the front of the tibia. This right leg is facing forwards. So this vessel that we see down here is in the front of the leg. So it's the right leg, so right anterior tibial artery. The blue vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. So here we're looking at the vein that's coming down the neck. Right? The artery right there going up the neck is the common carotid artery. The vein that's passing next to it is the internal jugular vein. Now that's the left side of the body, right? If you turn yourself to like the way he is and turn your head, that's the left side. So left internal jugular vein. The red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So we could also identify the internal jugular veins on this model. right? These blue vessels right here, those are also the internal jugular veins. This question's asking about the red vessel that goes right next to it. And those are the common carotid arteries. So this one happens to be on the left side. So left common carotid artery. The red vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. All right, so we talked about the 3 branches off of the aorta that are not paired, like that there's just one of them. Remember, that was the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, and then over here, the inferior mesenteric artery. We also have a couple paired vessels, so vessels where there's a left and right that come off of the aorta. For example, going to the kidneys, we have the renal arteries. Then this is pointing at these like little thin ones. They end up going all the way down into the pelvis. Those are gonadal arteries. They'll go down to the ovaries if it's a female, or if it's a male, they'll actually go down into the scrotum and go to the testes. But gonad is a general term. Gonad could mean ovaries or testes. It doesn't matter. It's just general. So that's the left side. So that would be the left gonadal artery. Blue vessel, the tip of the black arrow. The blue vessel, this is one of the superficial veins. Remember, we have one going all the way down the pinky side, and then one that goes all the way down the thumb side. This is on the thumb side of the hand. So that's going to be the cephalic vein. Left cephalic vein. What's the one called over here on the pinky side? That's the basilic. So cephalic and basilic. We just mentioned this one, but this is the second branch off of the aortic arch. Remember, the second branch off the aortic arch is going to go right up the left side of the neck, and that's the left common carotid artery. So here, red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. We saw this on another model. But again, if you just start right here at the bottom of the abdominal aorta, the aorta splits and gives you common iliac. So these are common iliac arteries. Common splits and gives you the internal iliac and the external iliac. So this is pointing to the right internal iliac artery. The blue vessel. All right, so this is heading towards the arm, right? If you kind of start right here, you have your superior vena cava. And remember, these two that go into it, those are the brachiocephalic veins, right? And then as we go towards the arm or from the arm, remember the subclavian vein is until you pass the first rib. And then after that first rib, that's axillary as you head down into the arm. Right? So this yellow arrow is pointing to the axillary vein, and that's the right side. So right axillary vein. Purple vessel at the tip of the green arrow. Purple means it's one of the portal veins. So I know this is a vein. Where do we start? We start at the spleen. Right? So coming from the spleen is the splenic vein. The first thing to merge is the inferior mesenteric vein. So green is pointing to the inferior mesenteric vein. Here's our third branch off of the aortic arch, right? Remember, the first one was the brachiocephalic trunk. The second one was the left common carotid artery. The third one is the left subclavian artery. And you guys tell me, the subclavian artery goes under the clavicle, and it goes until you pass what? The first rib. And then it becomes the axillary. Good. The red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. So here's your heart in the middle, and then on either side are your lungs. Right? So this is pointing to the red vessel that is coming from the lungs. So remember, to and from the lungs, the colors are flip-flopped. So even though it's red, that's going to be a vein coming from the lung. So it's pulmonary. That's the left side. And then we just have to see if it's superior or inferior. I honestly can't see from here. I think it's inferior. There's two of them. There's one on the top and one on the bottom. If it's the one on the bottom, then it's the left inferior pulmonary vein. The purple vessel at the tip of the black arrow. So purple is portal. So we know right off the bat that this is going to be a vein. Where do we start? We start over here at the spleen. Coming from the spleen is the splenic vein. First one to merge is inferior mesenteric. Splenic continues. The next one to merge is the superior mesenteric, and then they become hepatic portal. So the black arrow is pointing right here to the superior mesenteric vein. The red vessel at the tip of the black arrow. So this is pretty difficult to see from here, but this is pointing out one of the branches off of the aortic arch. So here you can see your heart here. The aorta is coming up and curving like this. The first branch off the aortic arch goes like this, right? It's passing underneath that vein right there, and then it splits to go up the neck and out towards the arm. So the black arrow is pointing to this branch right here, this first branch off of the aortic arch that's heading over towards the right. Let me erase it now so you can see. So you guys know that first branch that heads over towards the right is the brachiocephalic trunk, right? We already identified that off the heart model, but you guys should be able to identify it on one of these models too. So there's the brachiocephalic trunk. This second branch is coming like this, right? That's the left common carotid. And then the third comes around like this, and that's the left subclavian. Almost done, guys, almost done. In the fetal heart, so again, we're talking about fetal circulation. The connection between the pulmonary trunk and the aorta is called the ductus arteriosus. Remember that the fetal heart has two ways that it skips pulmonary circulation. One way is that it has a hole between the atria right here, so that blood can come into the right atrium and then skip right on over to the left atrium. That hole was the foramen ovale. It also has a little duct right here, so that blood that comes from the right ventricle out through the pulmonary trunk can skip right on over to the aorta and go out to the body. That little connection right here between the pulmonary trunk and the aorta is the ductus arteriosus. What if I showed you on the actual, like the adult heart, I showed you once the ductus arteriosus closes up, then what do we call that? The ligamentum arteriosum, like ligament between the arteries. The red vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. Again, I think we already did this. This was the celiac trunk. right? Celiac trunk right in the middle of all those branching. The red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. All right, so we just did the brachiocephalic trunk, right? The black arrow we said was pointing to the brachiocephalic trunk, which is right there. And then we know that splits and it goes up the neck as the common carotid. And then this branch right here that goes towards the arm was the subclavian, right? And that goes until you pass the first rib. So where that green arrow is pointing, right, where the green arrow is pointing, that is still the subclavian. So that's the right side. So right subclavian artery, like under the clavicle, subclavian. And after this, after the first rib, what does that turn into? That axillary artery. The blue vessel at the tip of the blue arrow. And again, we identified this on the heart model, but we didn't identify it on the actual like whole torso. The blue arrow is pointing to this vessel right here. Right, that's one of the two vessels that merge to give us the superior vena cava. So superior vena cava, and then it's got these two that merge. Remember, those are brachiocephalic veins, and there are two of them. So this is pointing to the shorter one, right? This one that's on the right side. So right brachiocephalic vein. Right, the left brachiocephalic vein is right there. The red vessel at the tip of the green arrow. So this is pointing to this small little connection that goes between the anterior cerebral arteries. Remember these thin little antennae that poke towards the front? Those are anterior cerebral arteries, but this question is pointing to that tiny little vessel that connects them to each other, the little interconnecting one. Remember the little interconnecting vessels back here and up here are communicating arteries. This is the one that's in the front, so it's the anterior communicating artery. And is there a left or right? There's only one of these. So just anterior communicating artery. There's just one. That, and then down here, the basilar artery, there's only one of those as well. The red vessel at the tip of the yellow arrow. This is the very, very beginning of the thoracic aorta. Right? Remember, there's the ascending aorta, and then from like here to here is the aortic arch. Right? Once we get past that third branch, the aorta is turned and it's starting to go down as the descending aorta. But we actually break that up into two different parts. So this part right here is the part that goes behind the heart, up in the chest. And then remember, it goes back behind the diaphragm and into the abdomen. This part here, like where the yellow arrow is pointing, is the thoracic aorta. Right, the part of the aorta in the thoracic cavity. So this would be thoracic aorta. The red vessel at the tip of the red arrow. These are the dorsal arches, and this is the left foot. So left dorsal arches. Alrighty, last question, guys. The blue vessel at the tip of the black arrow. This is, remember, we have the brachiocephalic vein, right? And then coming from the neck is the internal jugular vein. Going towards the arm is the subclavian vein. So until we pass the first rib, that is the subclavian vein. We're on the left side. So the answer here would be the left subclavian vein. Alrighty guys, that is everything. If you have any questions, go ahead and either comment or shoot me an email. Otherwise, happy studying and good luck on your exam.